Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness has appointed the office of rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of men and women, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom you have called to the performance of important trusts in these islands. Father, let your blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands and of those whose interest you have committed to our charge. And this we beg in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Be seated. The minutes of the 22nd of May, 2019. Senator Jardine.
Madam President, I move that the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, the 22nd of May, 2019 be taken as read.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President.
Senator Jardine, carry on.
Madam President, I move that the minutes of Wednesday, the 22nd of May, 2019 be confirmed as the correct record of that meeting.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The minutes of the 22nd of May, 2019 are confirmed. Thank you, Senator Jardine. Item number 3, messages.
No messages, Madam President.
Thank you, Clark. Item number 4, reports of committees. There are none. Item number 5, announcements. And we have 3. Senator Campbell.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I hereby present for the information of Senate the financial statements of the Information Commissioner's Office for the fiscal year ended 31st of March, 2018. Madam President.
I have a second. Carry on.
That's correct. Madam President, I hereby present for the information of Senate the annual report and accounts of the Bermuda Monetary Authority for the year ended 31st December 2018.
Okay. And the third one is yours as well.
That's correct,
Do
Madam President.
On.
Madam President, I hereby present for the information of Senate the consolidated overall report of the Efficiency Committee, April 2019, which was appointed by the Premier in March 2018 to review the functioning of all government departments and to recommend improvements in the efficiency of operations. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Campbell. Item number 6, notices of motion. There are none. Item number 7, petitions. There are none. Item number 8, statements. There are none. Item number 9, introduction of bills. There are none. Item number 10, the first reading of public bills. The following public bill has been received from the Honorable House of Assembly and is now read for the first time. Its title is, respectively, the Premier and the Ministers and Opposition Leaders Personal Staffs Act 2019. Item number 11, private bills. There are none. Item number 12, question period. There are none. Item number 13, orders of the day. We have no orders of the day today. Item number 14, motions. There are none. Item number 15, congratulatory and or obituary speeches. Would any senator care to speak on this? Item number 16, adjournment. Madam Kathleen Simmons, AG and leader of Government Leader in the Senate, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the Senate to now adjourn until Wednesday, June 13th. 12?
Yeah.
12.
All right, so
You there?
would any senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn?
Yes, I would.
Senator Jones, you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam President.
Good morning.
Good morning, fellow colleagues, and good morning to the greater listening audience. One of the things that I wanted to take note of as a motion to adjourn is the 2019 Transport Green Paper. This is a very important consultation piece that was brought forward by the government. We know from that particular work that was done, I believe it was a little over a year, that committee was put in place, and stakeholders within the transport industry was consulted in regards to transportation in Bermuda. Now, we know from that particular report, Madam President, that there were close to 2,500 people that were surveyed. There was several tens of thousands of visitors that were surveyed and asked various questions about transportation in Bermuda. And we realized that of the visitors that were questioned about transportation in Bermuda, 46% were not satisfied with the quality of transportation on this island. We also found out from that particular survey of the air visitors, 80% of our air visitors used the taxi form of transportation, and another 40% of the same visitors used our bus transportation. So a large number of our visitors and even our residents that are commuting to go to work or our children to go to school were tapped into and questioned about the quality of transportation in this country. And I will reveal my interest as a former taxi driver and a present minibus driver that has to take our visitors all around this island. I've been bombarded by my fellow taxi drivers and minibus drivers in the industry who have many questions and many concerns. And it is definitely a subject of discussion that's very important to many of our entrepreneurs and drivers in this country. Now, the backdrop of all of this, as we all know, is the challenges that we have with the buses. As recent as yesterday, the number of cancellations for some of the bus cancellations totaled 46, and the last couple of days it's hit the 30s and the 20s, and many of our workers cannot get to work. Our students cannot get to school. During the peak hours, that's when we suffer the most inconvenience. So my whole purpose in even raising the topic and bringing it to the attention of my colleagues here in the Senate and to the greater audience of the public around there is just to ask a couple of questions and to raise the level of awareness and concern in this forum that's before me here today. Now, we know that back in March, the Transport Minister was able to unveil a bus schedule for the country to adopt, and within 6 weeks, that particular schedule was trashed and found to be wanting and found to be not up to standard, which causes the entire public to sigh in despondency, because we know that so much time was spent in putting the schedule together, over $1 million spent on the consultant that actually put the schedule together. We don't have a relevant working bus schedule for this country as it stands today. So with the bus drivers that have embarked on a work to rule stance, we realize that transportation in this country is under much duress. I would even venture to say and use a phrase that's used in military terms, that maybe this government is experiencing battle fatigue. The burden of governing is becoming very tough and heavy to carry.
Madam President,
Madam AG.
I would politely suggest that the senator limit his comment to factual statements as opposed to these fatuous musings this morning as to the state of the government.
Thank you, Madam President.
Withdraw that statement about fatuous.
As I said earlier, having been bombarded by many within the industry, with the transport industry, questioning me, possibly knowing my role as a senator, possibly thinking that I have an inside track on the thinking and the musings of the government, which I don't have. We only have the facts that are in front of us that indicates whether this industry is successful or whether it's failing. We're only talking about the facts. That's whether it's in a newspaper, not just anecdotal examples, but we see it on a day-to-day basis. Now, one of the things that the government has done, which I realized was a temporary measure to get more taxis on the roads during the hours of the evening, when everyone knows that during the hours of 12 midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning, there's a shortage of taxis. So we see that the minister has released permits, temporary permits for 20 taxis. And my question would be, even with the additional taxis that are out there during those times of the night, is it really going to solve the problem? Especially when the real problem of getting taxis to where the demands are is because communication is bad, because we don't have for example, a central dispatch company or system where a central mechanism is in place so that we know where the taxis are around the country, so that we can join up demand with supply. So I don't believe that we need necessarily a green paper to tell us that we need a central mechanism in place so that we can have the data, that we can find the trends, so that we can follow the movement of traffic, so that we can identify where the problems are. And we know that there's 4 central dispatching companies in this country. I think something that the government should do and do sooner rather than later is look to see how we can get these 4 dispatch companies together. We know that they've functioned independently. We know that the taxi drivers, they function independently. But with a transport green paper that shows a survey that shows a failing grade, where our visitors and residents alike are being inconvenienced and are up in arms, this government needs to do what it can do to bring forward a system and put a system in place that solves the problem. One of the things that came out of this green paper was the fact that there are regulations and laws in place, but they're not enforced. For example, how many of us know of taxi drivers that don't even use their taxis to transport people and do their trade? They use their taxis for transportation. And we find out through this particular green paper that since 2010, the TCD has not been monitoring and regulating the taxis to the point, Madam President, where they know how our taxi industry is operating. Which brings me even to the issue back to the 20 special permits that are being issued by the minister. We want to ask the question, will those drivers of those 20 permits, will they be working 7 days a week? What happens if, say, for example, 10 of those special permits that have been issued to cover the demand at night decide to, on Mondays and Tuesday nights, they're not going to work? They want a day or 2 days off. So there's no way for the TCD to monitor who's out there on the roads. So by flooding the market with more permits and not having proper regulations and monitoring the industry, you're not solving the problem, Madam President. You are just, in fact, you are diluting the value of the industry by putting more taxis out there, but you're not actually solving the problem. So what I am encouraging this government to do is to start again to enforce the regulations of the operations of the taxis in this country. Now, we also know by legislation that taxis are supposed to be on the road for 16 hours. We recognize the challenges that taxi owners have. Some taxi owners do not want their taxis out there late at night. They cite the fact that, drunken patrons in their taxis can do more harm to their vehicle than if they decided just to keep their cars driving during the daylight hours. Um, we know there was an issue of insurance for drivers driving at night. All these issues come up. But I strongly believe that if the government, the TCD department, would again take up the mantle of regulating and monitoring the taxi drivers that are out there, make sure that those drivers that don't want to be a part of the industry, just using their cars for transportations, they need to be alerted. They need to be told that either you get with it or get out of the business altogether. So, in a nutshell, it does not take a green paper for this government to enforce the laws that are already in place. Now, we also know that with a central dispatching company or central dispatching mechanism, the government will be able to collect as much data, be able to see the trends. We know that each taxi driver was supposed to have a GPS system in their taxis, but how many of us know that a lot of these taxi drivers, they take their taxis to the TCD, it gets passed, it gets licensed with the GPS in them, and then they're taken out, which defeats the purpose of having a system in place that can digitally and with computer technology be able to facilitate efficient supply of transport through taxis for this country. And I realize it's always a financial thing. The taxi drivers feel that they're overwhelmed with taxes as it is, that they have to pay every time that they license. So this is something that the government can subsidize so that they can lighten the load for the taxi drivers. But again, this green paper really highlights the importance that we become a first world development country that can handle our transportation business at a high quality. One of the other concerns of my fellow taxi drivers and minibus drivers is they're concerned that this government is going to, at some point, take too much of the private sector business. It has always troubled me that the government has set up a booth right there on the cruise terminal selling bus tickets and tokens in direct competition with the minibuses. When it looks like the competition is causing many to feel discouraged that they are now competing with their government, as opposed to opening up the valve and allowing the private sector to carry some of the load, to pick up some of the gaps that's been clearly seen within the public transportation system. And that's definitely an area where the government can look to get assistance from the private sector. We've heard many say that the minibuses are sitting on the side of the arrivals quay waiting for business. They could be sitting there for hours. Meantime, the visitors are sitting at the bus stop waiting for buses for half an hour, 45 minutes. So if there was some way that the government could integrate their public system to include the minibuses, to include the private sectors, I cannot tell you how many of our fellow Bermudians who would have otherwise been out of work, Madam President, have been able to find good business, use their entrepreneurial skills to be gainfully employed. Without this arm of enterprise, many of our fellow Bermudians will be unemployed today. So, in summary, and in closing, Madam President, I am encouraging this government to think long and hard and quickly about finding a way to combine the services of the minibuses and the taxi service under one centralized system, so that they and we as an industry can know and understand the movements and the trends and the data gathering that's necessary for an efficient public transportation system understanding the financial part of it can be a little bit onerous for individual taxi drivers and minibuses, but also that it's important that we have a system in place that our locals can be proud of, that visitors, when they come into this country, can find transportation to get them anywhere on this island and not ruin what could be an enjoyable vacation of exploring this island from being one that can be very inconvenient, pricey, expensive, and take away from what could be a quality vacation on our islands. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Jones. Before I open it, I just wanted to apologize to the Senate body. I had omitted indicating that Senator Richardson is away on a course, and he is not with us today. So I just wanted to make sure you all knew that he was abroad. Would any other senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn? Senator Kemp, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Excuse me. There's been some recent revelations, I guess, in another place that's caused me to reflect back on the last almost 2 years of this government's term. And when I was canvassing both in the lead up to 2012 and the lead up to 2017, there was certainly a sense amongst many longtime PLP supporters in my area that I guess kind of the PLP needed a timeout, and that was almost their reason for either supporting the OBA or not supporting the PLP in the 2012 election, and that their fears of friends and family and this kind of stuff were being placated by the fact that this kind of change of support in 2012 would hopefully get their party to learn a valuable lesson, and that errors of the past would not be repeated this time around in government. So, seeing some of the recent events, I decided to go back and kind of look at a number of areas that have caused me to reflect on how they're disappointed that a lot of things in many ways haven't changed from the last term and the lead up to 2012. So starting with the very first cabinet, which was announced on July 20th, 2017, the Premier said, "We have reduced the size of cabinet to 11. I recognize that fiscal responsibility must start at the top." Of course, the way this was framed led people to believe that there was somehow savings, and that this reduction would lead to a more prudent management of the public purse. And unfortunately, in September, in this chamber actually, it was confirmed that the team was 11 full-time ministers. When you compared that to the previous cabinet of 7 full-time ministers and 5 part-time ministers, this new, albeit one-member, smaller cabinet was actually costing taxpayers an extra $150,000 per year. Now, one would say, okay, we have a smaller cabinet and fiscal responsibility starting at the top. So did this government control spending under the Premier and Finance Minister at the time who announced this smaller cabinet? No. The 2018-19 government spending increased by $39 million. When you compare the actuals from 17-18 to the revised 2018-19 figures that we all debated in this chamber not too long ago. Same, fast forward a year later, and we see that a former PLP Premier receives $1.2 million from the public purse for financial losses, as revealed by the Minister of Health in another place. Move forward to November of 2018. And again, there's a new cabinet shuffle, Madam President. And the Premier says that in efforts to streamline the government had moved forward with a reduction of the total number of ministries from 11 to 10. Now, there's two things here that draw attention. Of course, by stating this fact in such a way, it again, 1 year later, seems to want to mislead people into the fact that there is some kind of savings at the cabinet level. But of course, ministries are going from 10 to 11, but ministers went from 11 to 12, an increase. This increase cost another $220,000 to the public purse. Now, with these changes, this reduction of ministries, it was alleged that there would be brought about a greater efficiency and alignment of responsibilities, that the aim would be to streamline the size of government. Now, in the 2019-20 budget, did we see any of these increased efficiencies and streamlining? Did we see any savings to the public purse from less ministries? No. All we saw was more taxes and the same operational expense line. Fast forward a little bit further, Madam President, and in March 2019, it's revealed in another place that there was a slew of political and PR consultants that had been appointed to the various ministries, some seemingly unbeknownst to the Premier himself. It was revealed that the consultants were on PS 36 pay grade.
Madam President,
Madam AG?
I would welcome the senator specifying what he's referring to, as opposed to making these broad statements. We have a very short morning, and so
I'm sorry, is this a point of order?
I am making a point of order.
Under what?
I don't need to refer to that. We know what a point of order is. I'm suggesting that you
Madam
specify.
President, she's taking my time, and
Point
she
of
hasn't
order, you're
referred to a point of
you're
order.
misleading the Senate
How?
with inaccurate information. You're making general statements without specifying what you're
Those of you
referring to.
speak through the chair, please.
Madam President, if she would like me to quote a source for any particular piece as opposed to provide some vague debunkment of my facts, I'd be happy to provide them,
Would you state your source?
on which I've stated a number of facts. I'm not sure which fact the...
All of them. Let's start with the statements that were made on streamlining. Let's start with the statements that were made
They're all-
on reduced expenditure.
They're all
Let's start
verbatim
with-
quotes, Madam. They're in the public sphere.
Then you can
The
quote
Gazette has reported them. They're on Burr News as well.
The Gazette is not a factual source.
That's...
You can quote.
Madam President.
Senator Kemp, you did quote that there was information from the other place.
Yes.
I don't know if that is your source.
Yes, and I could pull up the Hansard as well. Quotes have also been taken from the Royal Gazette, which has reported the other place. If these statements are false, I would happily accept what the exact wording is, but this is the wording verbatim that I've taken.
He hasn't quoted anything, Madam President, with respect.
Okay. July 20, Royal Gazette reporting, Mr. Burt said at the time, and I quote, "We have reduced the size of cabinet to 11. Full stop. I recognize that fiscal responsibility must start at the top." End quote. September 27, 2017. Again, there the only quote was in response to a parliamentary question which was answered by the AG herself. September 2018, quote from the Minister of Health. In addition to a $600,000 payment, Dr. Brown has since been given another $220,000 in financial supplements, and the ministry estimated he would receive another $420,000. November 8, 2018, from the Royal Gazette. Mr. Burt said the changes would bring, and I quote, "greater efficiency and an alignment of responsibilities that reflects necessary priorities," end quote. He added, open quote, "Our aim in the long term is to continue to streamline the cost of government," end quote. My relation to the budget is from our budget debate, and I have the budget figures here, if we would like those to be quoted as well.
Yes, please, Madam President. Yes, please.
Summary of Consolidated Fund, estimates for 2019-20 to 2021-22. Current account expenditure, excluding debt and sinking fund, 17-18, $892,867,000. Revised estimate, 2018-19, $931,988,000. That's a $39 million increase. Madam President, may I proceed before all my time is taken up?
Continue, Senator Kemp. Well, we continue with the statement.
That's fine, Madam President.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll
Consultants.
continue to ask for his quotes.
That's fine. You have 6 minutes left.
That's fine.
Senator Kemp.
I'll move on to the recent revelation that really struck that really struck me in this line of thinking. The now Minister for the Cabinet, who sits in another place, was made Junior Minister of Finance in October 2017. As per Parliament.bm, the remuneration for a junior minister that sits in the House is $67,000, an increase of $11,000 annually from a member of Parliament that does not hold one of these positions. March 2018 to March 2019, thereabouts, he was chairing the Efficiency Committee and earning an additional $5,000 a month on top of the junior minister's salary, as per what was disclosed in the House of Assembly on Friday. Now, what strikes me most about this is that during that year-long period of receiving remuneration outside of his role as Junior Minister of Finance, a Register of Interest form was filed in December 2018. And in question 2, and this is available on Parliament.bm for the AG, in question 2, remunerated employment, office, profession, etc. Do you have any employment, office, trade, profession, or vocation for which, apart from membership of the House Senate, for which you are remunerated or have any pecuniary interest? And no was answered. These additional payments, these political and PR consultants, all these little featherings, Madam President, seem to only come to light when the opposition asks pointed questions in the House of Assembly, either through question time or through parliamentary questions. And it really makes me struggle to understand how we can have all these high-lofted ideals and things put forward, such as efficiency and transformational and transparency, coming from the government repeatedly, when we see that there seems to be this kind of self-interest of certain members, certain select members, it seems. The junior minister seemed to, or now minister, seemed to feel in the House of Assembly on Friday that, and I quote, "We all know junior ministers don't do much." So getting an extra $11,000 a year, chairing a committee for another $5,000 a month, this junior minister was getting close to $127,000 in a year for chairing a committee. And whilst there's many backbenchers, both in government and opposition members, who serve on a myriad of joint select committees because of their political purpose, and they don't take any additional pay for that. The union representatives on the Efficiency Committee didn't take any additional pay because they felt it was part of their existing role. And that's certainly commendable. The report isn't, from what I've read, a glowing endorsement of the running of government, and I'm curious as to why the union representatives didn't sign the report, but that's some commentary for another day. Now, Madam President, I see you looking at the clock, and I've had to circle back a bit, so I will...
You have 3 minutes.
I will sign off. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Kemp. Would any other senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn? Senator Hayward, you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam President.
Good morning.
Good morning, colleagues. Yesterday marked the end of my 2-year term as the president of the Bermuda Trade Union Congress. And as many persons know, I do wear multiple hats in this community. And I'm often asked, how do you manage? And I say the majority of my work is to improve the lives of other people. every role that I have is either voluntary, and it's aimed at improving the lives of others. The next question that follows is, are you finding politics? And then somebody makes a somewhat negative comment about politicians in general and says, but you're not like them. But I am a politician. I was appointed as one. I serve as one. And what I explain to persons is, it's a lot of mud that you have to walk through to do things in the best interests of people in the country. It's a toxic environment. There is a group of people that's always trying to bring you down no matter what you do. When you do positive things, it's never good enough. People take for granted the level of energy that each and every one of us put into trying to make Bermuda a better place. But what I can reflect on in my tenure as the president of the BTUC is that we put out a bold workers' agenda. The first item on the workers' agenda was the development and implementation of a living wage. Madam President, I worked on a LAC subcommittee responsible for the implementation of a living wage. I then sat on the Joint Parliamentary Select Committee, representing not only my party, but representing this Senate also. And we were able to produce reports, both committees were able to produce reports that were utilized by the House. I am pleased to say that we now have draft legislation that will be brought before us shortly. It was a lot of work put into getting that particular output. The majority of the unionized workers in this country, Madam President, make above a minimum wage. They are at living wage levels. So the work that was done was not even to service my membership, but it was to service the wider population of people in Bermuda. Those that need the assistance, those that struggle day to day, those who make what we would consider to be starvation wages. They exist in our community. That's why I wake up and attend this chamber and is actively involved in the Progressive Labour Party to improve the lives of those individuals. On the workers' agenda was also the development of a workforce development plan. I had the pleasure of chairing the committee responsible for producing Bermuda's first national workforce development plan. That workforce development plan hopefully better aligns our workforce development system and connects people with jobs, recognizing that many persons were unemployed in our community and remain unemployed and find it difficult to find re-employment. We said that the current system was not working and things need to be done. I am pleased to report that there is draft legislation for the implementation of a workforce development board that will carry out the remit of ensuring that the National Workforce Development Plan is implemented effectively. Madam President, all of my members have jobs. Nobody in my immediate family is unemployed. But I worked hard with a committee to ensure that we had a plan in place that services the people of this country that need it. I had that opportunity because I entered politics. This is the reason why I wake up to improve the lives of others. I recognize we have to walk through the toxic mud, but we are trying to make the lives of individuals better. On the workers' agenda was address youth unemployment. Part of the workforce development plan has a component dedicated to youth unemployment. Part of it was ensuring that we address age discrimination in employment, especially for those 65 and older. You will see that a committee that I chaired, our report was tabled in Parliament in the other place some weeks ago, and that draft legislation will come before us regarding shifting the retirement age. We recognize that persons, when they reach the magic age of 65, are cast out of the workforce. We recognize that they still have a lot to contribute in order for this country after the age of 65. We recognize that some persons, when retiring, are placed in financial hardship. But what we needed to do and wanted to do is ensure that we provide a path for those individuals to continue employment after 65. I'm a long way away from 65, Madam President, but I do care about that group, that population group. That's why I get out of bed and do what I do. That's why I entered into politics. Madam President, we recognize that our labor laws were outdated. And so we put in the workers' agenda to reform labor and pension legislation. Madam President, legislation will be before this chamber shortly, where you will see updated labor legislation. Legislation that will create better processes for employer and employee relations in this country. All of these things, Madam President, bring better outcomes for the people of Bermuda. This is the dialogue that is had within the caucus. It's centered on how we can continually improve lives. I was pleased to attend the Bermuda College graduation. And then I was pleased to see the volume of students that were beneficiaries of the government grant. That was a decision the government made that will undoubtedly improve the lives of our young people. They were very much appreciative. Even in the young person's address to her fellow classmates, she indicated that they are the current and the future. They remain optimistic about their future. I know at times we hear in this chamber that our young people feel as though there is a level of hopelessness. But that's not what was articulated at Bermuda College. That excitement that those young persons had after graduating from Bermuda College, I believe all of them firmly believe that they are on path to success. And this government wants to support them in on their path to success. Madam President, these are the things that we spend most of our time on. There is a narrative that this government is out to service friends and family. But let me agree with that. We are out to service friends and our family. Because this country are our friends and our family. And all what we've done, and all what I just explained, is to make their lives better. We're not enriching anybody through the political process. Let's not make that out as though that's the norm, as though individuals are just being enriched. We are enriching the lives of people in our community. That's what we're trying to do. Madam President, we say at times that, we want to work together collectively, but I think each and every one of us knows there is no desire for the two parties to work together. The Progressive Labor Party and the One Bermuda Alliance has no desire to work together.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Madam President, I believe that the senator is inadvertently impugning bad motives on this side of the political aisle. I can say of myself, if for no one else, that I have a deep desire to work and collaborate with this government.
Senator Jones, Senator Hayward, carry on.
Madam President, we see time and time again, the statements that were made today wasn't collaborative statements. If individuals really want to work together with the government, the easiest thing that the senator could have done this morning when he was discussing the green paper is to pick up the phone and call the minister and give his suggestions directly to the minister. Like, these are things that we can do. We can improve our communications. But what we do is we try to score political points and see if we can get in the newspaper the day after the Senate. But in the midst of all this toxic environment, there are a group of people, and I can't speak for that side of the aisle, but on this side of the aisle, that are committed to improving the lives of Bermudians, and we will continue to be steadfast on our mission. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Hayward. Would any other senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn? Senator Campbell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, what we have seen today, at least the earlier part of today, is the ultimate in Monday morning quarterbacking, or more aptly, Wednesday morning quarterbacking. What we've seen from the opposition that sit in this chamber is a flood of op-eds and interviews proclaiming doom and gloom over just about every piece of legislation that this government has brought to these chambers and in another place, expressing supposedly concern for Mr. and Mr. Bermuda and small business. But yet, since we were given a history lesson today, Madam President, earlier today, I'd like to give my own history lesson. The same group, or a member that sits on the other side in this chamber, sat silent, Madam President, when the OBA gave up control of one of our major assets and the revenue associated with that asset, i.e. the airport, for several decades, Madam President. Not a peep was heard from the senator during the debacle of the pathways to status, a rush piece of legislation for which the OBA, the then government, ignored the voice of the people, Mr. and Mrs. Bermuda, whom they now claim to care greatly about. No op-eds.
Point of order, Madam President.
Senator Kemp, what is your point of order?
Senator Campbell seems to be inferring to positions that senators prior to us held, and we can't certainly speak or reflect his comments that seem to be directed at us.
Madam President, I'm referring to the senator who just spoke. If I may be that clear.
Yes,
and
carry
that's all right.
on, Senator Campbell.
Thank you. No op-eds, Madam President. No interviews. When the OBA spent $30 million plus of borrowed money on the creation of Cross Island for the America's Cup, with no plan as to how this money would be repaid, no guarantee that the America's Cup would be returning to Bermuda, no plan as to how to use this space post-America's Cup. Madam President, not even the static of white noise such as that emanating from a television could be heard from the senator as his party ramped up preparations for the America's Cup, but apparently ignored the need to pass the necessary legislation to prepare this country for and to ensure this country passed the ATF evaluation last September. It's either they ignored it or they forgot about it in the furor surrounding the America's Cup. It doesn't matter which one is the case, because they did not pass not one piece of the legislation required to ensure a successful evaluation. I believe it was Madam AG that indicated.
Point of clarification.
Would you accept the point of clarification?
No, Madam President.
Carry on,
I
Senator
sat
Campbell.
quietly and listened. It's my turn now. It was this PLP government that prepared us for that evaluation. I believe it was Madam AG that had indicated at some point last year that we had passed 86 bills, approximately. I stand to be corrected on the exact amount, but I believe it was 80 plus bills. And a significant number of those bills were AML, ATF related, compliance related. And yes, a lot of those bills did increase the burden on small business. But it was necessary to pass those in order for us to pass that evaluation in last September. Perhaps the former government did not want to, they didn't have the intestinal fortitude to pass those bills because of the burden that it placed on.
Senator Kemp, what is
The
your
members
point of order?
impugning improper motives. I ask that he withdraw that comment.
Madam President, it's my opinion they did not have the intestinal fortitude.
Carry on, Senator
Thank you, Madam
Campbell.
President. Radio silence, Madam President, from the senator when his party failed to implement a single recommendation from the SAGE Commission. One of the first...
Point of order, Madam President. The Senator Campbell is seemingly taking a prolonged, direct attack at my person under the assumption that I was a senator at the time the OBA was in government. He's referring to a whole bunch of facts and events that preceded my time in government.
Madam President, the senator was a member of the then government. He ran in 2012.
Madam President, point of order, that is false. I was not a member of the government.
Madam President, he was a member of the party that was the government at the time.
Carry on, Senator Campbell.
The SAGE Commission, one of the first things they did once they became the government they assumed the government in 2013, not one of the recommendations implemented. We're talking about a history lesson here, because we see night and day between now and then. When the national debt was increased by approximately $1 billion under the OBA government, nothing from the senator. When the OBA Minister for Finance declared that Bermuda had been brought back from the brink under his stewardship, nothing from the senator, although most informed adults, individuals in this country knew Bermuda was still, and is still very much, in a fragile and precarious state. No op-ed or interview Madam President, informing how it was wrong.
Madam President,
For
point of order.
Senator Kemp, what is your point
The
of order?
member continues to mislead the House. I've actually wrote extensively about the effect of the debt over the last 20 years. There was a 27-page document I submitted a few months ago.
Madam
Mr.
President,
Campbell?
I'm referring to the period when his party was the government, nothing from the senator.
Carry on, Senator Campbell.
No op-ed or interview, Madam President, informing us how wrong it was for Mr. and Mrs. Bermuda earning $48,000, $50,000, $70,000 annually to be taxed on 100% of their income, while many in the corporate Bermuda paid taxes on a notional income, but then turned around and declared dividends or received dividends as compensation. In the tune, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of dollars, completely tax-free.
Again, Madam President, the member is misleading the House and/or imputing improper motives. I have spoken extensively about the need to enforce the notional salaries.
Carry on, Senator Campbell.
Madam President, my point that I was making, he said nothing about the fact that it was wrong for these individuals to be receiving tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of dollars tax-free.
Madam President, that's exactly what I've criticized with the lack of enforcement of the notional salary. The member's been impugning my motives and my integrity for not apparently speaking out prior to my involvement in government for the last 10 minutes, and he hasn't retracted any of the statements despite repeated points of order.
Madam President, we'll agree to disagree on that point.
Madam President, I don't believe it's a question for Senator Campbell to agree or disagree on, but the point of order is directed at the chair.
Senator Kemp, Senator Campbell has referred to the fact that you, whether you were in the Senate or not in the Senate, you did not, even as a member.
So,
that was my understanding.
So, Madam President, can we start talking about someone's silence in 1972 and use that to impugn their integrity in the present day before someone's involvement in government? That seems like an absurd position to go on a 10-minute tirade.
Senator Campbell, you carry on.
Madam President,
but determine what you are referring to.
Madam President, I think there's a big difference when you're not involved and when you are involved. But I'll continue. We've this morning heard reference to I guess the term used, if I remember correctly, was a slew of consultants, using words to mislead, because the current practice of this government is consistent with past practices of all governments when it comes to consultants. I'll conclude on the efficiency, with comments on the efficiency committee. Madam President, I wonder what is the real issue here. Is the issue because a member of the legislature received payment? If that's the issue, then...
Madam President, I can clarify that.
Senator Campbell, do you want to the Senator Campbell?
No, Madam President, because I'm running out of time as well.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. If that's the issue, then why is the focal point only on the former junior minister, when we have a senator who also received payment as part of this commissioner? And I'm not attacking either. I'm just saying that's a fact. We have a senator, but that senator is not the focal point of any discussion as to why they took payment. I believe senators and members who sit in another house, they function on many committees without compensation, and they do a lot of work, Madam President, so I have no issue with this payment. Is the real issue the amount? Perhaps if the junior minister was only paid $2,000, as was the senator, this would not be an issue. I don't know, Madam President. I'm confused.
Madam President, I'm happy to remove the senator's confusion, because
Madam
I did
President.
state clearly in my time.
Madam President, or is it simply the fact that a member of the PLP received compensation? No mention in all of this, Madam President, that for an investment, for an expenditure of $130,000, there was a $12 million improvement in the state of this country as a result of their work. I don't believe there is anyone sitting around this table today, Madam President, who would not invest $130,000, who in a year's time would receive
$12 million.
$12 million. I don't think any of us would decline that type of investment. Madam President, I'll conclude by suggesting there is no issue, Madam President. It's just an opportunity for political grandstanding. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Campbell. Would any other senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn? Senator Robinson, you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam President.
Good morning to you.
So today I have heard mention of op-eds and rushed legislation, all the things that can be pegged to the Progressive Labor Party as well. But my main purpose of speaking today is to reaffirm what the role is of the opposition, because it seems as though it's being muddied up in us simply attacking and trying to obstruct the government, which is not at all what we are doing on this side. The opposition, and I know I can speak for my colleagues on this regard, has the best interests of the country at heart. We want the best option for Bermuda to be passed. So when we scrutinize the government or provide criticisms, Madam President, it is not from a place of, oh, it's the PLP doing it, but a place of making sure that the people of Bermuda get the best possible option. So we come together to scrutinize and make sure that these legislations are passed in the best interest of Bermuda. It's really that simple. And regarding the op-eds that were mentioned, just recently there were 2 politically charged op-eds that were released by PLP backbenchers with barely any substance in them except for what the previous administration did wrong. And I know a lot of people have mentioned to me, Madam President, that they would rather a government with a 25-11 majority to just get on with governing and not waste time putting out op-eds directed at an opposition that at the moment does not have any sway in the House regarding numbers. Regarding rush legislation, just recently we had a legislation that was read 3 times and passed in one session. We also had a legislation that was brought forward regarding the sex offenders registry that was put forward before any consideration of the Joint Select Committee that was created to investigate.
Point of order, Madam President.
Madam AG, your point of order.
That is an incorrect statement. The Joint Select Committee sat. The Joint Select Committee consulted. I made representations to the Joint Select Committee. What you fail to realize is that the government does not have to embrace the recommendations of the committee. If you go back recommendation by recommendation, you'll note that most of them already exist or were embraced, and the ones that weren't were not relevant to this government's mandate. So let's be clear with respect to the role of a Joint Select Committee.
Oh, we're clear. And I also know that you do not have to take the recommendations of a Joint Select Committee.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The President.
Yeah, we understand that. That's literally what the point was. There was a point made earlier that we had passed legislation without taking in proper scrutiny. So I was also drawing reference to that, in which the AG then made the point for me. So as far as collaboration goes,
Point of clarification, Madam President.
Do you accept the point of clarification, Senator Robinson?
not at this time.
Carry on, Senator Robinson.
As far as collaboration goes, we have not obstructed every single piece of legislation that is passed in this House. We have repeatedly stated which legislation we support and which legislation we do not support. That has never been a vague thing. Regarding the remuneration of a junior minister, what we have an issue with on this side of the fence is not that a member of the PLP received remuneration. It was the fact that we believe that it is already in his remit as a junior minister and member of parliament to be chairing these committees, and that is being construed into the fact that we do not want someone from the PLP to receive funds. That's not at all what the case is. So, hearing on the other side that we devolve into political point scoring and then having to sit through 10 minutes of political point scoring really proves that one side is definitely looking for op-eds. It's not this side. So, I just wanted to speak and throw my hat in the ring on that note, Madam President, and with that, I'll close.
Thank you, Senator Robinson. Would any other senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn?
That's it.
Senator AG, Senator Simmons.
I thought we'd have a short morning, but it turns out to be quite interesting and lengthy, and thank you to senators for your comments. Let me start with Senator Jones. We always have an issue politically about the subject of consultation. And you mentioned previously today that the Green Paper was not necessary. The Green Paper speaks to consultation on the subject of transport in the country.
Point of order, Madam President, if I may.
What is your point of order, Senator Jones?
My point of order is she may have misheard me, misunderstood me, but I was not saying that the Green Paper in its entirety was unnecessary. My point was that one section of the Green Paper that was suggesting centralizing of the dispatching system should be done did not need a Green Paper to come up with that solution, as that's been in the public space for a long time.
Thank you, Senator Jones. Carry on, Senator.
Madam
Kathleen
President,
Simmons.
thank you. One of the things I take great pleasure in doing when I come here is to make notes. And as the senators speak, I listen with great interest because there may actually be something that we can take away and use. And I quote what I made a note of. He said the Green Paper is not necessary. And my point being, you can't have it both ways. The opposition takes great pleasure in making noise about the lack of consultation. The Green Paper speaks to consultation on a very important subject, and I expect that it will be embraced against that backdrop. But your comments and your recommendations have actually been noted. We seem to have a problem discussing money, and we seem to have a problem with respect to our understanding of the complexity of governance. And I've heard comments today about the size of cabinet, the expenditure, so on and so forth. And as a member of the cabinet, as a minister responsible for a huge portfolio, I can say hands down, I wish I had more money to spend. Because you can't take Bermuda back to the past. And the complexity of the issues that we're dealing with, Madam President, are huge. The financial issues, the social issues are huge. And so let's not get caught up in who spent $10 on Tom. At the end of the day, we need a result. What I'm hearing is that there may be a desire for more transparency with respect to expenditure. And we certainly will take that on board in the event that there may arise occasions where someone did forget to publish a contract. But let me make it clear, consultants don't come out of the sky. We have a ministerial code of conduct that allows ministers to have 2 political consultants. And the minister has the opportunity to assess their operations and determine whether additional support is necessary beyond that which is provided by civil servants. And that's what we do without apology. With respect to the issue of part-time versus full-time consultants, let me correct myself. Ministers, hands down, I will say that any cabinet does not do justice to the country and the business of governance if they don't have full-time ministers. And having inherited departments that fell under ministries where there were not full-time ministers, you can see where that's a disservice to the country. And that's not meant as a criticism, it's actually a fact. This is huge. You can't do this thing piecemeal, and you can't do it part-time. With regard to Senator Kemp, I'm sorry to have taken up your time, but I welcome a factual nexus for the comments that are made. What we mustn't descend to is rhetoric that does not have a backup. So thank you for providing your quotes, and I'll continue to ask you to provide your source so that the public is best served with facts as opposed to our political rhetoric. I have good news to impart this morning, which speaks to what Senator Haywood, and I'm not going to get emotional, this is really crazy, had to offer about what we do. On the 26th of May, I departed these shores accompanied by the Permanent Secretary and the Director of Child and Family Services to visit our children. Reference to our children is reference to the children of this country who are overseas in institutions committed to advancing their well-being. And there's been a very unfortunate narrative and dialogue with regard to psycho-ed and all sorts of negative comments made about why, how, where, who. We've had parents speaking out. We've had the World Gazette fishing overseas and undermining the operations of the government with respect to the services provided to our children. It was a whirlwind visit of more than 6 facilities, and I saw our children. And I will say hands down that I will applaud till the end of time the bonds that the Director of Child and Family Services, Alfred Mabry, has forged with institutions overseas to provide services that we do not and cannot provide for our children. We've seen residential care, we've seen psychological assessment facilities at hospitals, we've seen sex offender programs. There's one program that our children are sent to where they have various sexual disorders, things that I've never even heard of. I got a lesson on the effect of pornography, and I intend to come back to this chamber with real details and to speak about it publicly. And I say all that to say there are things in this country that surpass political partisanship. And most of you will know that as the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs responsible for our children, I don't take debate. There have been numerous reports, negative reports about our operations, about the staff of Child and Family Services, and I can say hand on heart, where there is ever a misdeed, it is dealt with the procedures that are in place to deal with it. I will encourage everybody on both sides of the divide, based on what I saw, that we cannot continue to do a disservice to our children with this negative and vicious dialogue. The conditions that we referenced today pertained long before I took this post. My hope is that they will not continue while I'm here and after I'm gone. We spoke in the context of the budget about the money that's spent in the education system for psychological services for our children. I actually saw the face of that with our children. The teams that are responsible for our children are dedicated, committed, And we're so happy to see that Bermuda actually cares. We are actually miles ahead. So to the Royal Gazette, who has reported in this chamber today, please do not harass these institutions. Please do not try to obtain information that is detrimental to what we're trying to accomplish. If you have a legitimate question, I'm more than happy to answer it. But I'll say to senators today, there is much work to be done. And in the months that come, I will be bringing legislation to protect our children. I've actually invited several of the specialists that I met to come to Bermuda to educate the public on some of the issues, particularly the effect of pornography on our children. I was amazed that we even have a problem, a very specialized problem that leads me straight to Westgate with regard to our sex offenders. So to senators, be prepared. The legislation's coming. We have international conventions that we're signing on to, where there's a slew of initiatives aimed at protecting our children. I do not expect to have the discourse on that subject descend to what I generally hear with regard to this subject matter. So with respect to today's session, I welcome the spirited comments, but there's much work to do. And there are issues, Madam President, and matters pertaining to our children and the socioeconomic condition of this country that we must partner and move forward on in the interest of the country. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Kathleen Simmons, AG, and Government Leader in the Senate. Senators, the Senate stands adjourned to 12th of June next week, Wednesday. Thank you. Senate is adjourned. Remember to see Derek with respect to your tablet.
Derek has everybody's tablet.
Yes, and he will release at least how many minutes each?
I have a bunch of
10 minutes with each?
things I don't even know how to use.
5 minutes with each of you?
When? Today?
Today, now. He would like to.
We'll be in the lounge.
Okay.
Yes.